Welcome to my talk on world building and language. If you were here, well, not here, but if you were at club on Monday when it was our snow day, then you will have already seen this, but I'll probably say things differently. So enjoy that, I guess. And if you haven't seen this before, which is probably most of you, congratulations. This is actually really interesting. I assure you, just stick with me. Okay, so yeah, what am I talking about? I, I never did edit this. Just ignore. Come on, where's the mouse point? Okay, yeah, just ignore that. That's just nothing. If I was a professional, I'd delete it, but whatever. I'm gonna talk about why. Somewhere in here, we're gonna talk about how. Then we're gonna talk about language and a bunch more language because language is cool and there's actually a lot to talk about, and yeah, it's what I'm interested in. So let's go. Okay, so we're on to the why. First of all, world building is good for engaging your players. If there is an interesting setting, the players will be more interested in your game. Also, having a nice compelling setting will give you good motivation for your players and for your villains and other characters in the world for why they're doing what they're doing, as well as giving you a direction for various designs of characters, levels, game mechanics, and all that stuff. So having good world building can make things when a lot easier when you're making your actual game. So, what can you build? Which is a good question to start off with. You could build a language, which we will be talking about and kind of demoing later. You can build planets, land masses, continents, space, dimensions, multiverses, whatever the heck you want. You can build places. Places are important. You could build nations and cities and states and boats. Those don't really fit here, but you could build boats in theory. Theoretical boats. You can build cultures. Cultures are important. They help shape kind of your character's general beliefs, or at least the general beliefs of an area and the people there and stuff like that. History. That's going to be a good source of villains, biases of people. If you want to talk about that, maybe you do. Um, Different things that are going on. Cool historical events that you can hear about in passing that your players will wish you wrote a book on, but you actually don't have a lot of history and information on. You just know that happened, but you can pretend like it's there, so it becomes interesting, and then eventually you reveal that there's nothing there. That you could do that. You definitely could. Like that one big continent in the Dishonored world that no one ever really survives on. I mean, I bet they have stuff about it, but yeah. Anyways, basically, you can build like literally anything. It's also worth noting that you don't have to build literally everything. For example, if you're making like an alternate history game, you really can just start with Earth and then figure out what you're changing to get to that history. It will save you some time. Alternatively, you can build literally everything, and you'll have a really interesting world that you probably won't have time to fit all of. But I guess that's where one of the first rules of world building comes in. Show about 20%, show about 10% of what you actually build. You want to show your players and the people consuming your stuff the tip of the iceberg in your actual thing. Okay, so if you do want to go through and build everything, this is the order that I kind of made up for what you'd want to do if you're building your big entire world. You want to start with your location, where it takes place. If you're doing anything in space, maybe the planets and solar system. If you're doing, we're going to mention any stars, or want to have like a cool night sky with constellations and stuff, then maybe you map out some surrounding stars. Just basically the relevant locations. Then you want to talk about the magic and any special tech. Magic if you're doing fantasy with magic, maybe there's warp drives or stargates. You want to cover those because those are going to have a big impact on your world. And again, like location, it's going to lead you to your climate and stuff like that about your world. So both of those will then influence your species. Maybe one has an affinity for magic. Maybe they live in a cold place, so they have like extra fur on them or something. So after you get there, use all those again to get your cultures and religions. What do they value? What interests them? What do they think about the world? And then that's going to influence the nations and governments they build. What are they all like democracies, or are they like small family tribes or something like that? And then those nations and governments are going to create their own histories over time and as they move over that world, which is going to lead to conflicts between different groups and different cultures being made, separating off and stuff. And that's going to be filled then with major figures like in the real world, maybe Julius Caesar. Like he did some things in Rome, started off the kind of ended the Republic actually, started doing conquering things in future France. So yeah, and that comes up sometimes in the real world, like right now. So you're gonna want to be able to talk about some of those famous people and know like who your big influencers are, who people know, and what are common household names. But in general, you might not have enough time or enough budget to really build this entire world. It's a lot of work and takes a lot of time. Although admittedly, once you get up to like maybe, once you get up to around here, you're definitely going to be very good for building a game. And arguably, you can get started with like settings and levels probably around here. You know what your general models should look like what players are going to look like. If hopefully you'll know what different species are good at. Maybe ones like kangaroos are good jumpers, or maybe ones humans are good thinkers, or maybe you have orcs that smash everything. So at that point, you can start kind of brainstorming like game mechanics and combine that with location. You're gonna know like what if you're gonna have jungles or a lot of water worlds or something like that. So you can kind of get started earlier, but again, generally you'll have a better job starting off around here once you're at the end. But yeah, like I was gonna say, generally you don't have the time or the budget to do that, and like for something like Game Jam, you're probably not gonna have the time to do hardly any of this unless the story is like your big focus and you really want to spend the time to get it right to incorporate it. So I would recommend something more like this. Figure out the important locations that are going to be happening near where your game takes place. So any surrounding nation or any surrounding locations like the big ocean next door or that giant desert that you're going to have to walk through. Then big places that people might mention in passing. Figure out your species, like are they going to be humans or are they going to be like fantasy races or something you create. Figure out what those different groups in there that inhabit that world generally are known for. Like stereotyping can be dangerous, but maybe these guys are really polite. They travel around a lot in trading caravans, and they're like the Venice. If you know like that stuff, and you know they dress kind of like people on Hoth. If they dress like people on Hoth, and they're in desert trading caravans for some crazy reason, then that's good enough to get started. You know what things are going to look like. Maybe also take a look at their architecture, like what you want their buildings and stuff to look like, since that's probably going to show up in your game. Get the major nations and places, so both the nation and cities you're in and around, and anything else that you might want to mention in passing, or maybe there's a big country across the ocean, and maybe you get news from stuff over there, like someone's talking about, ooh, did you hear about this big war or some protests happening over there? Like, just enough that you can hint at it. And then major figures like who rules the place, who are your player characters, who runs that city you're in for the entire game or whatever. Mm-hmm. So with okay, so us to warnings, right? So yeah, basically, let's be careful how you do this. Like, try not to go around culturally appropriating stuff. Ideally, you won't even be doing that much. You'll get inspired by something in real life, and then you'll go through it in your world and see something like figure out what role it plays in culture, understand it, do some thinking, and like yeah, just talk with people, and then contextualize it within your world. What would this look like in your world, and would your culture actually do this, and how would it be different? How would it change? Just make it your own thing and mix from different groups, because stereotyping real cultures can be kind of bad. You'll wind up with stuff like Scottish dwarves who are all just alcoholic and have that one accent or something. Maybe don't. It again, just use common sense if you start, especially if you start with like a real life minority. And again, just be careful. That's yeah. Be careful. Don't do anything dumb, and take the time to think about what you're doing. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about how you'd actually use this. So, in generally, you're gonna want to use this to create different cohesive kits for different groups. You want to have like a unified color palette, sounds, names, music, architecture, environment, maybe animals around there, and NPC looks, loading screen, levels. Oh yeah, loading screens. You want to define those along with where your boundaries are for the actual groups or for the actual locations. And then yeah, also with other stuff that you'd use in your game to make a cohesive palette for your different groups. I probably said cohesive a lot, but whatever. So you can incorporate game mechanics, like a good example is in D&D and MMOs. Oftentimes different races will have different bonuses, and then they'll all have their different architectural styles and everything. For example, in World of Warcraft, if I'm walking around and see a city in the distance, if I see a big tower made out of wood that's kind of rickety with spikes, I'm fairly certain that's orc. Or if it's a stone or kind of normal looking village, maybe that's some humans or some Morgan if it's more Victorian. If it's kind of dilapidated and there's like a lot of dark colors and weird slime, that's probably undead. So you can kind of get a good idea of who's being there before I even get close enough to see any NPCs to get killed by. And all the different zones and people have their own kind of musical styles. You can tell what zone has what, or what music goes with what zone based on the environment there. And yeah, you get a very cohesive set of visuals and everything for your game to go with your different groups. So when you use this consistently with your across your game, this can have a lot of benefits, like that example of World of Warcraft I just gave. You can now, your players can now tell if that place is going to be friendly or if they should avoid it. So yeah, it can have real game benefits in addition to your actual like story and world and immersion. Okay, so another good use is for your map. This is from the Banner Saga, and their map conveys a lot of information. You have the different place names, like whatever that says. They have their own font that really tells you a little bit about their setting along with the music. They actually have some songs in Icelandic. You know your location, you know where you are and where you might go in the game, and you generally stay in this kind of middle area so far from what I've played. Um, if you click on any of those cities or any of those names, you'll get a brief description about them, so you get a little bit of lore from your world, and you see where you might want to go or where you might get to go in the future of the game. So right there, you're telling the player a lot about your world with just a little bit of work, and it's like something that you don't have to force your players to sit through, but they can take the time to look through if they want to. So yeah, with that, move on to language. Yay! Because this is the fun part now. So first of all, what is conlanging? So think of Tolkien or Dothraki from Game of Thrones. It's make your own language. Other examples include Navi from Avatar. Um, there's more. Tolkien had Elvish, Dwarvish, and a few others, I think. There's or Klingon. That's another good example. So yeah, there's a lot of these in fiction, and they can be quite rewarding for your dedicated fans because a lot of people have learned actually how to speak Klingon or some of these languages. So you give something cool to your dedicated fans or to just the people who are interested, and you can actually use this quite a lot. Like that last slide or two with the map, you could use your own language there, especially if you make your own font for it, if you want your own writing system, which we'll get to. So yeah, parts of language. There's the sound inventory, so the actual sounds in it, like all these sounds I'm speaking right now that make up these words. The syllable structure, the lexicon, which is the actual words in the language, how sentences are constructed, if it has a writing system, and if so, what kind and how, the semantics and grammar of the sentences. What we're really going to be looking at right now is our sound inventory, our syllable structure, and that's really all we need to get some basic use out of this in our game for names. So let's also talk about when to make a language. If you want to distinguish different cultures during games, so if you start out at one place and then with some group of people and you move far away to someplace else and there's another very different group of people and you want to farther distinguish them from just what you can visually see and what you tell your player, this can help. Maybe you want to distinguish different species, since sometimes maybe your dog can only bark, but you can make these sounds that we're saying right now. So obviously not all creatures can make the same sounds, which makes language different between not only different areas and different people, but between different species sometimes. And to distinguish your world from the real world. Like, if they're not speaking English, then that's gonna make your player notice. You also want to make it when you have the time and when the game is focused on the world or story, because if you're not really going to be using this, or if it's not that important, then honestly you might be able to use your time and resources elsewhere better. So yeah, again, like before, when not to make a language, if you just want to sound vaguely like an existing language, just copy the just use the real language. To be fair, you can do some rhetorical stuff and sound vaguely like another language, like maybe you have a bunch of stops, so like t, k, maybe some glottal stuff. If you take some time to look at the IPA or this upcoming part, this will make a little bit more sense, and you can sound a bit more rough for your language, since that's not something very common in English. In fact, Dothraki does this to make it sound, to kind of give it a feeling of I'm gonna say barbarian-y maybe ish, to at least a Western audience which is not used to that. But kind of like how music sounds has like different connotations to different cultures, this will kind of be an iffy thing to rely on. And again, you can just use the real language. Um, if you don't have the time or the budget, again, just maybe use those resources somewhere else to make your game better. Okay, step one. Okay, so we've all played a game with an inventory system. Your pseudo language, which we're going to be making sound inventory, is basically the same thing but with sounds. And it's worth noting here that letters aren't sounds. The alphabet is not a one-to-one ratio with letters to sound. Similarly, we have more than A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y for vowels because, again, we don't have a phonetic alphabet, which is why the International Phonetic Alphabet exists. Segue. The International Phonetic Alphabet has one sound per, or one symbol per sound, unlike English. Symbols are oftentimes gonna line up with English, but like in the vowels down here, because of the vowel shift in like the whatever that time was, I think the 1600s in England, they're not going to line up exactly, and that will mess you up. Generally, I'll be linking a site along with this, the IPAchart.com, I think, where you can click around on any of the symbols, and it will basically play that sound so you can actually listen to it when you're choosing your sound inventory. I use it a lot because learning the IPA is nice and will make this go a lot faster, but if you don't have the time, it's good enough. This down here, this is a chart of all the consonants. So this row on top, that's going to refer to where the sound is made. So like bilabial, that's with your lips, like but and puh. You can notice both your lips are doing things versus dental, that's with your teeth, and these other things all have meaning. Left and right on each of these things, that's voiced and unvoiced. So like if you feel your neck and try puh versus buh. No, wait. Is that where buh, puh, buh, puh? Wait. No. Just a minute. Let me find one that's good. Okay, so here's a good example. V and F right down here. So try So put your hand on your neck or on your Adam's apple and try making those two sounds. For the F, you'll notice it won't be as vibraty versus the V. You'll notice it'll be more vibraty because the difference is whether or not your vocal cords are vibrating. And then finally, this thing, that downwards bit is how it's made. So plosive is like explosion of air? I don't know. It's air coming out. Nasal that uses your nose somehow. Fricatives, that's from like friction with the air. Yeah. So that's what that generally means. So next, I mentioned earlier that like this is the list of sounds that humans can make. Maybe your species is not human. Then they can make other noises. Maybe they use like their hands and clapping, since like some South African languages use clicks in their actual language. Also, there's stuff like tonal languages where the actual tone plays into what the sound means. So there's more depths here. I'm gonna mostly focus on the actual sounds. Just know there's more you can do here. Or maybe they have a partly telepathic language. So let's see here. Another thing, like I mentioned with Dothraki, that you might look into is sound rhetoric. Tolkien's elves have a fancy, flowing, elegant sounding language because they have flowing sounds, glides, and such, while the orcs have plosives and glottal / uvular stuff, and it sounds a lot more rough. So you can kind of use this to your advantage, again bearing in mind that it's mostly going to be effective on a more Western audience. Uh, all these stuff, this is kind of like low in your throat, so that's why, like, the glottal, I'm not gonna even try to make those sounds. They're kind of hard. Go to the IPA sound chart. Oh, great. It actually, oh, well, you can't see that, but it's IPAchart.com. It will, you can listen yourself. So for this example, why don't you pause the video here and choose a few sounds, and I'll do the same, I guess. Okay, so I assume you're back. I assume there's still time to pause it because I have to take a picture of this so I remember it for the next part. But yeah, so I've chosen put and but since I was saying it so much. The, that's the, and r, and I think that's now, but it might be a weird trilliar or something like that. And then the glottal stop, so there might be a little stop in the sound. And then for vowels, I chose. I know what this. I know this should be something. I'm not gonna actually say what it is because I don't remember what the actual sound is, but it's a sound, which you can go check for yourself if you wanted to. English has about, if I'm remembering correctly, like 28 consonants and about 9 vowels. Again, because our alphabet doesn't go one-to-one from letters to sound, like CK can be a K sound versus or there's other examples. I don't want to spend forever thinking about them. Just know that. We spent a lot of time on this slide. Let's see what we can do with our new sound inventory next. Never mind. Apparently we're doing Romanization first. So this isn't necessary, but it's useful. What a Romanization is basically writing your language in the Latin alphabet, so you don't have to use your own font or the IPA, which is kind of hard to remember what the sounds actually mean. So if your player is reading it and you have a romanization right there, they can go like, they can kind of sound out your words vaguely. So the main idea is you want to be consistent, be understandable, and don't do weird crap. It should be readable to your normal audience. So, like, Zelnaga, that's kind of okay, but they have a weird apostrophe in there, which doesn't do anything and just is there to look weird. I don't remember what this is from. I'll probably find the link, but apparently it's some insect god, which I guess maybe your insects for some reason say 3 U's and 4 R's and that sounds like something specific, but no, that's not, no, you're not going to pronounce that noticeably different. You're just going to confuse people and then they'll get annoyed at you and you'll have people complaining about your weird spellings of soap. I don't know why you'd be spelling soap with a bunch of letters, but maybe you are. So don't. Just stop now. Okay, syllabic structure. So this is now, right, we also have to do this before we can actually use that sound inventory. I probably should have said something, but there will be a link to what are those called? To a Google Sheet, that's what it is. That it has like basically almost every sound in the IPA. I normally save a copy, and highlight the sounds I choose. But yeah, that will exist. Anyways, syllable structure. So a syllable structure is how we define and make syllables. So you don't have like a as one syllable. That would be 2 separate syllables because they're kind of centered around that vowel. And so if you're a computer science student or if you're a linguistics student or you take a Ling 201, you probably noticed. If you're a computer science student, maybe you've seen something vaguely like this in CS 301. But basically you have the onset, which can be 1 or 2 consonants, the nucleus, which is the vowel, and well, you have the onset and the rhyme is divided into the nucleus, which is the vowel, and the essential part of any syllable, and the coda, which is consonants that come afterwards. Let me just erase all this. And so in this notation at the bottom of the screen that I will circle soon, parentheses like right here. Oh God, that's not even a highlighter. RIP. Like right here. Those parentheses mean it's optional. So for this one right here, this means you can have 1 or 2 consonants at the start, 1 or 2 vowels in the middle, and 2 consonants at the end optionally. But at a bare minimum, you need 1 consonant, that one, and 1 vowel per syllable. So yeah, that's like how you'll see stuff written. So syllables in English follow this big structure right here. Most languages have a lot smaller structure for that. Yeah, so I say there, parentheses mean optional. English has, yeah, you can do a lot with that because those optional consonants. And so yeah, we're gonna use this to construct names with our language. So let's say we can have, well, we're gonna have a vowel, maybe 1 consonant at the beginning, optionally, maybe an optional second vowel, and maybe, no, I don't want another vowel, I want another consonant at the end optionally. So you can now have either a vowel, 2 vowels, vowel or consonant, vowel, consonant, etc. That's like the basics of this. So I'm going to take a picture of that so I remember it. Note, depending on how you do this, I could see someone writing. Actually, no. Really, if you're careful, you can do this in like 1, like we have for English. Probably. I'm gonna say that, and it's probably gonna be true. It might not be. We'll find out. So next, if you have time, here's where you do some rules. So we have our consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, optional, optional. I should probably pause this for this, but whatever. We have this as our syllable structure. But what you can do is you can add rules for this. So like, if you remember, I had that glottal stop. Maybe the glottal stop can only appear right here because it's kind of weird to have constant, vowel, constant, stop, and then keep going. So I'm gonna restrict that to there. And maybe some consonants can actually act as vowels. Maybe, did I have M? No, I had N. So maybe I want N to be able to fill the position of a vowel in my language. So this is, yeah, basically a step where you'd add your interesting restrictions like that. Or I think in club we had some crazy weird, we had something like 3 consonants or consonant or 2, 3 vowels in the middle, and then a consonant at the end. I think, yeah, okay, so that was a situation where I split it up into what probably should have been this, and then that as my structure for that, because, and then add a rule here that says that this type of structure must be followed by this one at all times. So that would be a way I'd get that construction consistently in my rules. Yeah. So just in general, you want your rules to make your language more pronounceable or usable, or anything else that you want to make it weird or interesting to you. It's worth noting this is a great place to add flavor to your language, because this will really help it stand out with from at least as far as what we have with our basics so far. Ooh, this is a good thing to say. Brandon Sanderson says a great magic system is defined by its rules, and that's kind of the way it works here. As much as language is productive to make new words, the rules make this language we make at this stage will solidify our flavor and further help us to stop us from making an English clone, which is a real danger. This also comes partly from Artifexian on YouTube, but it's really useful to take time to sound out different sound combinations, especially if you, especially if you intend to have voice actors speak or say the lines, or have people actually say this out loud. You're gonna want to make sure that's generally pronounceable. And if anything is difficult, consider adding a rule forbidding that combination, like having that glottal stop in the middle. So yeah, if you don't plan on fleshing out the language, this would be a good time to hammer out word endings, or beginnings, circumfixes, infixes, possible. Oh no, I'm not going to go on a tangent about fixes. Appropriate grammatical gender if you want. Approximate grammatical gender if you want to. And so yeah, you can say maybe in your mind words end in a few different ways, and you'll pretend like you have a gender system, and then if you spend too long without actually making it, you'll have a really weird language that will be kind of a pain, or have some, I guess, convenient irregular words. I don't know. You'll have something. So now we make some names. Excellent. So that is a link to fantasynamesgenerator.com. I like that site a lot because I can go there, make some names, adapt them to our language, and then change the sounds to be, again, in our language. So let's make our own names. If you haven't decided on what your own syllable structure will be and any rules, now's a good time to pause and go do that. So yeah, let's get doing that. So I just wrote down the sounds and the syllable structure. So from here, go to fantasynamegenerator.com, which I'll probably link, and maybe use the town generator or find one you like. Personally, at the top of each generator, it has a description of what it generates. I prefer ones that say they make random possible English words, because then you don't have actual English words in your language, or at least you avoid that as much. Especially when you're dealing with place names, it's kind of convenient not to worry about finding out that your place is some random town that someone lives in, and that's gonna take them out of your game or your world. So go on there, generate, find a few names you like, write them down, pause the show before that, I guess this is a show, and then come back here once you have some. Okay, so gonna go back to doing things now. Yes, magic of pausing my recording to go find some names. I found some random generator. I clicked the random generator button, and then found a few names that look kind of not English. So yeah, I have Mamari and Cavcab. So you'll notice first off, mostly there's at least one or two sounds that aren't in our language, and they definitely don't follow our syllable structure. So I want to kind of diagram this out into what will become their completed syllable structure. So this looks like we're going to have a consonant, vowel, consonant, and then consonant, vowel, vowel over here. Here we're going to have consonant, vowel, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant. So looks like these words would both be valid in our language syllabically. Next, I'm going to copy over the sounds that we have in our language. Over here, we have, I'm going to use blue for this. No, blue would be bad for this background, so let's use green. Over here, we have R, so we can bring that right down. We'll have, Wait, was that an M or a V or an R? It's not an M, but oh well. It looks like an R now. We have the I symbol, although I'm fairly confident that's not actually an I, so I'm gonna not bring it down. Over here, it looks like we have V. Wait, no, that's a U. Okay. Oh, we have B's though, so we'll bring that down. So after this point, that's all our stuff that we can directly copy. So now just find the sounds that are most similar in your sound inventory to the ones that you have remaining. So we have some M's, those are pretty close to N, so I will substitute in N for them. A, I think A would be closer to that backwards C symbol. So I'm going to do that here, and then we're left with that I, which I'm going to use since it's a different vowel that's adjacent. Similarly, we're going to do that A, I over here. K, that's going to be, I think that's going to be closest to our glottal stop since it's stop. So I'm going to go with that. That's not a, this is an R, not a K, in case you can't tell. But unfortunately, this would violate one of our rules of only having a glottal at the end of our sentence. So, oh right, P is also a stop, so I'll put a P in there. And over here, vowel, we have an A there, so I'm going to continue using this. And so let me see if I can go pull up the IPA chart to figure out how to say this. IPA chart. Google, yes, interactive IPA chart. So let's see here. What was I again? I is E. And then our other one is all. So we have nonaroi. Let me see here. We have yep, so na. Just give me a minute. This is gonna take a while. No, nona roi, non roi. That's our translation of Mamara. And then for the other one, right? I'm gonna see how they do the glottal stop. They do it. Oh yeah, they kind of do that weird thing. I'll try to do it. So let's see here. We have what is that one again? That's the O. Poi. That's actually more like that should be a stop there. Poi. Stop or pause in there. Poi. Ob. So that's our translation of Cavcob, more or less. So yeah, they don't sound quite that similar. If you start with words that are already similar to your sound inventory, you're gonna preserve a lot more of this. And of course, if we had a more detailed language, we'd also then enforce our grammatical genders if we had them, and any other stuff that should be represented on the noun we're building. So yeah, that's kind of the process. Hopefully you can follow along and do that yourself. Yeah. Let's see here. You can keep on doing this. Oh gosh, now what? Okay, apparently we're on now what? Yeah. So after that, we can use this for our place and character names. That's going to be the easiest place. So if you're making a map, fill it up with use this method, or just custom make the names yourself, which I find requires a lot of creativity because I don't want to think up random letter orders that sound interesting. Place them on a map, assign them a place, talk a bit about them in your whatever you're cataloging your world building, and make sure you don't forget their name. If you have any books that are famous, like the Bible in your world, give it a name. If your player is someplace, give it a name in your language, or languages even. If you have important events, maybe reference them, like the maybe they have an interesting name, like the bacon event, where all the bacon disappeared. Change that name from bacon to something else. Any characters, like NPCs your players interact with, give them names that are appropriate for their culture and language. Yeah. Also, if you have voice acting, this will help you even more because your players will start to hear how stuff is supposed to be pronounced. So you're essentially teaching your players how to pronounce your language with your names so they can start trying on their own. Yeah. So at this point, we have even more language because there's a lot you can do here, and that's like the bare minimum we just did for using the language in your game. Yeah, possible goals. Oh, come on. I do not want that animated. Anyways, possible goals. It these are some options for how you might want to use language in your game. You could maybe make the entire game in your language, like communicate non-verbally with the player, like character actions and animations for emotions and stuff. Make the language not exactly important, but just sugar on top for the players that take the time to translate everything. Um, Maybe the player can learn to translate into English, like you make a rudimentary Google Translate, so your player initially starts out with not knowing how to speak the local language because they're not from around there. And slowly, as you level up that skill, your player will or the character will tell the player what their translation is, and generally they'll be correct, or maybe they'll just be wildly guessing at first. It also could be an interesting way to gate cross-faction communication in an MMO. Make players have to go through some work to translate to the other faction's language. Even better, if you don't tell them that you're doing this, then maybe they'll figure out how to do it eventually, probably through replicating patterns and a lot of work, and suddenly they'll start noticing that if you do this well enough, maybe they'll notice that it's not one-to-one words, but it's actually translating because there's more detail in your language. That would be kind of amazing. As far as unlocking the language, Fez and Secrets of Rayticon, they have a cipher shown here that you can. In Secrets of Raytheon, you slowly unlock letters, so when you go back and read those various runestones, you start to get it in English, the more letters you know. In Fez, you have to go and do this manually. I did it for a little bit with a whiteboard and a Steam guide because I'm a cheater and I want to know what things are saying. And there was some very funny dialogue that I enjoyed taking the time to do, so this can be quite rewarding for your players and can be a very interesting way to add depth to your world and make your game a little bit more interesting to players. So next, I think sentence structure would be a good place to look. If you want to have more than just names, sentence and your structure and grammar are going to be important. So your NPCs look like they're talking and kind of actually are, at least in theory, saying something that would work in your language. So you have to consider stuff like if the adjective goes before or after an object. Like English, we say it's a red bird versus in Spanish it would be, I don't know the name for bird, but I'm fairly certain the color would come after because of how they do stuff. Also, subject, verb, object order, or verb, subject, order. Verb, subject, object order. Subject for SVO versus VSO. Yeah, that thing. The second dash. Also, clauses, which this I'm definitely going to read from my notes. So, but first, if you want basically a basic a basic idea of how these work, take Linguistics 201. You'll get like everything you need to know. But the basic idea is that sentences are made up of phrases that are made up of words. So, and the phrase structure is how you can rearrange sentences. Like, I went to the mall yesterday. The mall was great then versus I went to the mall yesterday. It was great then. We replaced the subject with something else. Oh yeah, we replaced the subject with just the end of the last sentence. We kind of dropped it. Or when I stepped out into the bright sunshine from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind from The Outsiders versus I had two things on my mind when I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house. Or when a sen- or we start a sentence with something happens, I need that comma. That's like an example of us rearranging. I think so. This happens in most languages. You can rearrange sentences. That's the basic idea of how the phrases work and clauses. If you want to know the actual mechanics of how to use that, Wikipedia or again Linguistics 201. So yeah, that's this slide. So let's move on to the next one then. Grammar. Okay. There's a lot of grammatical cases. Very likely, your language very likely will have a few. Sometimes they may be separate words like English's to indicate destination versus in like Spanish that's like an actual Spanish has that kind of as a word, but that can be encoded on the actual verb as well. Working out your grammar will allow you to go from approximating language to get even closer to language. All you really are missing is a lexicon at that point, more or less, to distinguish your language. Right here, this thing, that's a link to Wikipedia with a list of cases. There's like 100, and some of them are pretty cool. For one of my languages that I somewhat worked on, I saw that there were some language had a historical tense for things that are of historical significance. So that's kind of interesting. I bounced off that and added a storytelling tense to my language, since stories were supposed to be culturally significant to those solar polar bears I mentioned. They're kind of like a thing that, yeah, I'm not going to go into details, but yeah. So you can build stuff based on what already exists, because like the real world is a great place for ideas, but it does tell you what's possible naturally, but artificial stuff can be equally fun and lead to really cool languages. So yeah, but also other parts of grammar are like verb, adjective, and noun agreement. So in English we have count is we have plural or singular. You have a banana or you have bananas, plural or singular. You have the s at the end, so it's marked on our nouns. Um, or also, oh yeah, grammatical gender. That's another thing. So in Spanish, there's masculine and feminine. German also includes a neuter. So you can have you can have as many grammatical genders as you want. Generally, what we're gonna look for categorizing stuff is genders generally group stuff. So like maybe you have a gender that's filled with dangerous predators, or one with berries, or one with inanimate objects, etc. Or maybe just do a more more European thing of just like masculine, feminine. I added in that language I was mentioning. I added in neutral and inanimate. So yeah, you can do stuff there. Verb agreements. So that's like tense. Like we add ed at the end when something happened in the past, but you can get a lot more specific again if you look at those cases on Wikipedia. So yeah, there's a lot to do here, and you may or may not show these on the nouns whereas extra words. So figuring out how you want to convey that information is what you're going to want to do. Also, if everything's like inflected on the verbs and nouns and everything, that means your sentence structure can be a lot looser, since you can get the information from various points in the sentence and it will still be clear, so you can rearrange the words a lot easier and maintain the same meaning. Yeah, onwards to the next slide. Writing system. Oh, this is a fun one. So yeah, probably the last thing before making your lexicon is figuring out how to write your language. And yeah, like I said, this is a lot of fun too. All that stuff, uh, all that stuff up there is worth considering. Oh yeah, so if you write left to right, right to left, up to down, um, than what was written with. So what tool is going to play a big role in what your glyphs, which are the actual letters, look like. So, for example, cuneiform was made with those weird triangle rods, so they have a lot of like lines and triangles in that writing system. Versus English, we're writing on now paper and before parchment and papyrus with ink, which is very glidey, so we have a lot more curves compared to like say the rune system from up in like Scandinavia that has a lot of hard lines because they're carving into stone. So what you're writing on and what you're writing with is going to change how your glyphs work. And if you think about the history of how the language was written, that can give you a lot of information if you take the time to figure out how your different glyphs change throughout time and what they should look like at the time of your game. You don't have to necessarily go through and write it. Actually, what David Peterson, who is the creator of Dothraki from Game of Thrones, in his book The Art of Language Invention, recommends just write out your symbols 100 times and as fast as you can, and they'll change as you do that, and you'll get to a nice point that's kind of easy, and it's a great way to like age a letter quite simply. Then just make sure that you can tell them apart. Yeah. I think I covered everything. Glyphs are like the actual symbols. Oh, also you're gonna want to consider if you have an alphabet, which is what we have, or a syllabary, whatever, where each symbol is a syllable. Or I think there's a few other options. You could also have a system that's almost an alphabet, but I think it's an adjab where they drop the vowels out of the writing, and it's up to context, and people who actually know the language will fill in the vowels themselves. So, yeah, you can do stuff. There's options. Spend some time looking at the options. I think that's everything for this slide. Finally, lexicon. Now, I know, like, a lot of language is words to us. Like, I've been speaking for the past 56 minutes in words, but honestly, words are probably the thing you're going to do last. You're just going to want to make a bunch of words, define them, figure out how they change. Like if you have a verb, if you have green, like, or if you have a river, what would something that, how would you make that into an adjective, and what would that mean? Or how would you make that into a verb? Should there even be a verb, etc. This is a great point to add flavor into your language now that you have all this set up. For example, Dothraki has between 40 and 60 different words for horses. That alone tells you a lot about how important horses are to their culture, similar to how I think some Alaska Native languages have some similarly high number of words for snow, because there's a lot of snow. So yeah, you can add a lot here. Just keep track of your words and your definitions. Add some irregular verbs and stuff. So oftentimes, like common words like yes and no. I went to a place, so to. Walking. If you have some common verbs, consider mixing them up and making them weird to mess up your language, but also to make it a little bit more real, because languages aren't perfect and don't always conform to their rules, because they're kind of like a living, changing thing. I think this is almost the last slide. So, yeah, just make the words and consider their meaning, because that will give you the flavor of the culture if you, for some reason, if you're building the culture and the language at the same time. So other resources, like I mentioned, Artifexian on YouTube has some great conlanging and world building videos that I highly recommend. The Art of Language Invention by David Peterson is a wonderful read and very interesting. It got me interested into linguistics, which is why I took Linguistics 201, Intro to Linguistics. It's 5 credits. You can literally take the final and all the tests as a group, and it's a lot of fun. R/Conlangs, that's another good resource. The International Phonetic Association, I think they do the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet. The Language Creation Society, they have a yearly or bi-yearly conference, Conlanging, and they have talks there that you can find online that are interesting if you're interested in this. So, yeah. Thanks for listening to my talk. I somehow managed to keep it under an hour. I hope you enjoyed and enjoy your weekend or whenever you listen to this.